The Rise of the Servant's Daughter, an epic tale of Aurem's kingdom. In the ancient kingdom of Aurem, King Zorath ruled with wisdom and prosperity. The land was lush, the people content, and the king was admired far and wide. But with no son to inherit his throne, King Zorath's deepest worry was the future of Aurem. He had 4 daughters, each beautiful and noble, but only one truly captured his heart. Her name was Elira, and she was the daughter of a servant named Lyrien. Lyrien had once been the most trusted maid of Queen Isaiah, a woman of great beauty and ambition. But when King Zorath fell in love with Lyrien, the queen's jealousy turned deadly. Lyrien gave birth to Elira, but she did not survive. Raised in the palace, Elira was constantly reminded of her lower status by her 3 elder sisters, Leora, Selene, and Mira. Despite the cruelty she endured, Elira grew up wise, kind, and deeply connected to the people of Aurem. She was beloved by the villagers, who often whispered that she had her mother's grace and her father's compassion. When the king fell ill, the elders declared that one of his daughters must be chosen to rule. Leora, the eldest, believed the throne was hers by birthright. Selene, the most vain, thought her beauty made her the obvious choice. Mira, the most cunning, sought to outwit her sisters for the crown, but Elira, the daughter of a servant, was not even considered a contender. The trial of the mantle was announced. The royal mantle, hidden within the palace grounds, would only reveal itself to the true queen. Whoever found it would take the throne. The search began immediately, but as her sisters scoured the palace in vain, Elira chose a different path. Elira had no desire for power. Instead, she continued visiting the villagers, offering her time to listen to their concerns and heal their wounds. They adored her for her simplicity and grace, but back in the palace, her sisters were scheming to ensure she never posed a threat. Queen Isaiah, filled with hatred for Elira and desperate to see her own daughters on the throne, devised a wicked plan. She hired a mysterious seer to plant cursed objects tied to the dark spirits of the Crescent Woods in Elira's chamber. Once these were discovered, Elira would be banished from the kingdom as a traitor, unworthy of the throne. As the days passed, rumors spread throughout Aurem. Whispers of Elira's supposed treachery reached the villagers, but they did not believe the lies. Elira could never betray us, an old woman declared in the market square. She has the heart of a queen. One evening, as Elira sat in the palace garden, contemplating the growing unrest, her most trusted maid, Yara, approached her with grave news. "My princess," Yara whispered, "your sisters and the queen are plotting against you. They plan to accuse you of witchcraft, and soon the kingdom will turn against you. You must be careful." Elira's heart sank, but her resolve only grew stronger. "If I am to save this kingdom, I must prove my innocence and find the mantle. Only then will I have the strength to protect Aurem from its enemies, both inside and out." That night, as a storm raged outside, Elira snuck through the dark corridors of the palace, guided only by the whispers of ancient spirits who had watched over the royal family for centuries. Deep within the castle, she found a hidden passage that led to the sanctum of Aurem, a place long forgotten by the royal family. Here, the truth of the kingdom's ancient past was written in stone, and the royal mantle was said to be guarded by the spirits of the land. But Elira was not alone. Her sisters, desperate to claim the throne, had followed her into the sanctum. In the eerie glow of torchlight, they confronted her. "You will never be Queen Elira," Leora shouted. "You don't deserve the throne." Selene's voice dripped with venom. "You're nothing but the daughter of a servant." Mira, the most dangerous of all, smiled coldly. "This is the end of your little game, sister." But Elira, calm and composed, stood her ground. "This isn't about me," she said softly. "It's about the future of Aurem." The ground beneath their feet began to tremble as ancient magic stirred. The spirits of the sanctum had awoken, and their voices filled the chamber. "Only the one with a pure heart shall ascend the throne," they intoned. As the spirits began to test each of the princesses, the trials grew more perilous. Leora, blinded by her greed, faltered first. Selene, obsessed with her own reflection, was lost in a maze of mirrors. And Mira, trying to manipulate the spirits, was ensnared in her own web of lies. Elira, however, was guided by her love for the people and her desire to bring peace to the kingdom. She passed the trials with grace, and as the final challenge loomed, she knew the royal mantle awaited her. But just as Elira reached for the mantle, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, Queen Isaiah herself, holding a forbidden artifact, intent on destroying her once and for all. This version leaves the story on a cliffhanger, with an impending final showdown between Elira and Queen Isaiah. The stage is set for an epic conclusion, where the true ruler of Aurem will finally be revealed. As Queen Isaiah stepped forward, her face twisted with malice, Elira's heart raced. The forbidden artifact in her hand glowed with a dark, menacing energy, the Orb of Seroth, an ancient relic said to hold the power of corruption. Its mere presence sent a shiver through the sanctum, causing the very walls to tremble. "Elira," the queen hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You should have stayed in the shadows where you belong. A servant's daughter will never rule Aurem." The spirits, once guardians of the sanctum, recoiled at the sight of the orb, their voices turning into a distant hum of warning. They had vowed never to let such dark power enter their sacred space. The queen, however, had no intention of listening. She raised the orb high, and with a flick of her wrist, unleashed a wave of dark energy toward Elira. For a moment, everything seemed to slow. Elira's instincts screamed at her to run, but she knew she couldn't back down. Not now. Not when Aurem's future was at stake. Summoning her courage, she raised her hands, hoping that the spirits would protect her. Just as the dark energy was about to strike, the royal mantle, still hovering just out of reach, flared to life, surrounding Elira with a golden light. The dark energy clashed with the golden aura, creating a fierce storm of power. Queen Isaiah's eyes widened in shock, but her expression quickly shifted to fury. "You are nothing!" she screamed, pouring more of the orb's power into her attack. The force of the magic sent tremors through the ground, shaking the entire sanctum. Elira gritted her teeth, the weight of the power pushing her to her knees. The mantle's protection wavered, but Elira focused on what truly mattered. The people of Aurem, the villagers who had put their faith in her, and the promise she had made to bring peace. She could not fail them. Suddenly a voice echoed in her mind, soft yet strong. "You are worthy, Elira. You have the heart of a true queen." It was her mother, Lyrian's voice, carried on the winds of the ancient spirits. Fueled by this memory, Elira rose to her feet. Her eyes burned with determination as she reached out toward the royal mantle once more. The golden light intensified, pushing back the dark energy until it shattered the queen's spell. With a final surge of strength, Elira grasped the mantle. As soon as her fingers closed around it, the air in the sanctum shifted. The mantle wrapped itself around her shoulders, fitting her like it had been waiting for this moment all along. The spirits, now swirling in joyous approval, whispered their blessings upon her. Queen Isaiah staggered back, disbelief etched across her face. "No, this can't be happening," she cried. The orb in her hand dimmed, its power fading as the rightful ruler of Aurem claimed her destiny. Elira stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Your time is over, Queen Isaiah. Aurem needs a leader who cares for its people, not one who is driven by greed and hatred. Before Isaiah could respond, a burst of light erupted from the mantle, enveloping the queen in its brilliance. The orb shattered, and the dark magic was banished from the sanctum. Isaiah fell to her knees, powerless and defeated. Her reign of cruelty had come to an end. But as Elira turned to leave the sanctum, her elder sisters, Leora, Selene, and Mira, emerged from the shadows, their faces pale and shaken by the trials they had faced. Sister, Leora said, her voice trembling, we never believed that you would. Her words trailed off, as if the weight of what they had done was finally sinking in. Selene, still vain but softened by the ordeal, stared at Elira in awe. You really are the queen, she whispered. Mira, always calculating, seemed at a loss for words. For the first time in her life, her cunning had failed her, and she was forced to confront the truth. Elira looked at her sisters, her heart heavy with the weight of their betrayal, but also filled with compassion. Aurem needs all of us, she said softly. The kingdom cannot heal if we are divided, but I will not let greed or ambition tear this land apart. The three sisters exchanged uncertain glances. They had each plotted and schemed to win the throne, but now they stood before the true queen, one who had earned her place not by force or deception, but by her love for the people. As they bowed their heads in submission, the air in the sanctum grew still. The spirits faded, their work done. Elira, now queen of Aurem, led her sisters out of the ancient chamber, determined to rebuild the kingdom together. Back in the palace, news of Elira's triumph spread quickly. The villagers, who had never wavered in their faith, gathered outside the royal gates to celebrate their new queen. The elders, once divided, now saw the truth and welcomed Elira as the rightful ruler. But as the sun set over Aurem, a shadow passed over the land, a reminder that not all threats had been vanquished. Far beyond the borders of the kingdom, dark forces stirred, angered by the defeat of Queen Isaiah's dark magic. An ancient enemy, long forgotten, had been awakened by the orb's destruction. Elira's journey was far from over. With her newfound strength and the support of her people, she would face the challenges ahead. But the question remained, who or what was lurking in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike? The mantle had chosen Elira, but would she be ready for the battle that was yet to come? And so, the tale of Queen Elira continues, with new enemies rising from the shadows, and an epic struggle for the future of Aurem on the horizon. The celebrations in Aurem echoed through the land. Queen Elira, standing tall in the palace courtyard, gazed out at the sea of smiling faces. The kingdom had been restored to peace, and her heart swelled with hope. But deep inside, there was a quiet unease. Something was coming. As night fell, Elira retired to her chambers, exhausted but content. She had overcome great odds to claim her rightful place, but as she lay in bed, a strange dream overtook her mind. In the dream, the sky above Aurem turned blood red, and the once lush lands withered into a barren wasteland. Shadows stretched across the ground, crawling like living creatures, consuming everything in their path. Elira tried to run, but her feet were bound by invisible chains. A voice, deep and ancient, whispered through the air, "The throne was never meant for you, child of light. The darkness stirs, the ancient pact is broken." Elira awoke with a gasp, drenched in cold sweat. Her heart pounded in her chest, and the lingering echo of the voice sent chills down her spine. What was this dark force, and what did it mean by the ancient pact? Unable to shake the feeling, Elira summoned her trusted maid, Yara, at dawn. "Something is wrong, Yara," Elira said, her voice trembling slightly. There's a darkness coming. I felt it in my dream. Yara, ever calm and composed, placed a reassuring hand on the queen's shoulder. Dreams are powerful, my queen, but they are often warnings, not certainties. What do you remember? Elira described the red sky, the creeping shadows, and the mysterious voice. Yara's brow furrowed. The red sky. Shadows. That sounds like the legends of the Obsidian Order. The Obsidian Order? Elira asked, unfamiliar with the name. Yara leaned in closer, her voice lowering to a whisper. It is an ancient cult, banished from Aurem long ago. They were followers of the Dark King, Thorian, a ruler who believed in harnessing the power of the Shadow Realm. Legend says Thorian made a pact with the dark spirits, exchanging the soul of Aurem's heir in return for dominion over the lands. Elira's blood ran cold. But that was ages ago. Surely the order is long gone. Yara shook her head, her expression grim. There are rumors that some members of the order survived and have been hiding in the Blackwood forest, waiting for the day their pact could be fulfilled. Elira clenched her fists. If the Obsidian Order was still alive, it meant that they were coming for her, the rightful heir. I need to know more about this pact. If it involves Aurem's throne, it's my responsibility to stop it. Yara nodded. There's one who may know more, but she lives in the depths of the Blackwood forest. Her name is Soraya, a seer who has lived for centuries. She was once part of the royal council before she vanished. Then I will seek her out, Elira declared. It's time to face whatever darkness is rising. The following morning, Elira donned her royal armor, simple yet elegant, designed for the ruler who cared more for her people than for appearances. She gathered a small group of loyal companions, Yara, her faithful maid, General Caden, the most skilled warrior in Aurem's army, and Lirael, a young healer with knowledge of ancient magic. As they set off on horseback, the vibrant green of Aurem's lands slowly gave way to the thick, twisted trees of Blackwood forest. The deeper they went, the darker the forest became, until even the sunlight seemed afraid to pierce the canopy above. The group moved cautiously, aware that danger lurked in every shadow. The air grew colder, and a mist began to rise from the forest floor. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the occasional distant howl of some unseen creature. Stay close, General Caden warned. This place has been cursed for generations. It's said that the spirits of those who wander too far are never seen again. Elira kept her eyes sharp, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. But it wasn't fear that guided her, it was determination. She knew that the fate of Aurem depended on finding Soraya before the darkness could strike. Hours passed as they navigated the labyrinth of trees, until finally they came upon an ancient stone hut, hidden deep within the forest. It was covered in vines, with strange symbols etched into the stone. This had to be the seer's home. Elira dismounted and approached the door. Just as she raised her hand to knock, the door creaked open on its own. A low, raspy voice called from within. I've been expecting you, Queen Elira. Cautiously, Elira entered the dark hut. Inside, the air was thick with incense, and strange relics from forgotten times adorned the walls. In the center of the room sat Soraya, her eyes clouded with age, but filled with an unsettling awareness. I know why you've come, the old seer said, her voice like the crackling of old parchment. The Obsidian Order has awakened. Elira's heart raced. Is it true? Is the ancient pact still binding? Soraya nodded slowly. The pact was never broken. When your ancestors defeated the Dark King, they only banished him and his followers to the Shadow Realm. But the Order has been waiting. The orb your stepmother wielded. It was one of the last remaining artifacts of Thorian's power. Its destruction has weakened the barrier between our world and the Shadow Realm. So they're coming for me? Elira asked. No. Soraya whispered. "They're coming for Aurem's soul, and they will stop at nothing to claim it." A heavy silence filled the room. Elira knew that the danger was greater than she had imagined. "What must I do to stop them?" she asked, her voice steady. "The path will not be easy, Queen Elira," Soraya said, her gaze piercing. "You must find the Sword of Light, the only weapon that can sever the connection between the Obsidian Order and the Shadow Realm. It was hidden centuries ago, deep within the catacombs of Gorath, where the darkest spirits roam." Yara gasped. "The catacombs? No one who has ventured there has ever returned." Elira met Soraya's gaze. "I have no choice. I will go to the catacombs and find the sword." The seer's expression softened. "Be wary, Elira. The sword is protected by ancient forces. Only the purest of heart can wield it. But there is something else you must know." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The Obsidian Order seeks more than just Aurem. They seek the lost heir." Elira frowned. "The lost heir?" Soraya nodded. "The true heir to the throne of Aurem was taken by the Order long ago, hidden away. Only the true heir can break the curse forever. You must find them, or Aurem will be consumed by the darkness." Elira's mind raced. A lost heir. She had been raised as the rightful queen, but if this heir existed, everything she thought she knew could change. Armed with this knowledge, Elira and her companions left the seer's hut, their mission now clear. They would have to travel to the catacombs of Gorath to retrieve the Sword of Light, and along the way they would have to uncover the mystery of the lost heir. But as they ventured deeper into the forest, a shadowy figure watched from afar, its eyes glowing with the same dark energy that had haunted Elira's dream. The Obsidian Order was already one step ahead. As the sun set and darkness covered the land, the race to save Aurem had truly begun. The sky over Blackwood Forest had turned a dull, steely grey, as Elira and her companions made their way toward the infamous catacombs of Gorath. Though their mission was clear, the weight of the task ahead weighed heavily on all of them. The Sword of Light was not only their key to severing the Obsidian Order's connection to the Shadow Realm, but it was also their last hope for saving Aurem. General Caden led the way, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. Elira rode close behind, her thoughts swirling around the cryptic warning from the seer. A lost heir. It seemed impossible. But if the Obsidian Order sought this heir, then the stakes were even higher than she had imagined. "Do you think the legend of the sword is true?" Lyriel asked quietly, riding next to Yara. "That it can actually destroy the darkness?" Yara, always practical, gave a small nod. "The seer believes it, and if there's even a chance that sword can help us, we must find it. But the catacombs, they're no ordinary place. They're filled with ancient spirits, some more dangerous than the Shadow Realm itself." Elira overheard their conversation and felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She knew that retrieving the sword would be perilous, but there was no turning back now. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the land, the group finally arrived at the entrance to the catacombs of Gorath. The entrance was a crumbling archway, half covered in vines and etched with strange runes that glowed faintly in the darkening light. Beyond the arch, a yawning tunnel descended into the earth, its darkness impenetrable. Elira dismounted her horse and stood before the entrance, feeling a cold breeze drift from within. It carried with it a whisper, faint but unmistakable, "Enter at your own peril." General Caden tightened his grip on his sword. "The catacombs have claimed many lives, my queen. Are you certain about this?" Elira turned to her companions, her eyes filled with determination. "If we don't retrieve the Sword of Light, the Obsidian Order will claim Aurem's soul. I will not let that happen. We must go." With a nod, the group prepared themselves. Each one lit a torch, its flickering flame casting eerie shadows on the stone walls of the tunnel. Together, they stepped into the mouth of the catacombs, leaving behind the safety of the surface and descending into the depths of the earth. The further they ventured into the catacombs, the colder and darker it became. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone, and the silence was broken only by the distant drip of water echoing through the chambers. Strange markings lined the walls, symbols of ancient magic long forgotten. "Stay close," General Caden warned, his torch casting light on the path ahead. As they moved deeper, the tunnels became narrower, twisting and turning like a labyrinth. It was easy to see how many had been lost here, their bones lying scattered in forgotten corners. But Illyria's mind was fixed on the Sword of Light. She had to believe that it was real. After what felt like hours, the tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber. The ceiling was so high that it vanished into darkness, and in the center of the chamber stood a stone altar. On top of the altar, bathed in a soft, ethereal glow, was a sword. Elira's breath caught in her throat. It was more beautiful than she had imagined. The blade was long and gleaming, and the hilt was adorned with ancient symbols that shimmered in the dim light. This was the weapon that could save Aurem, but as Illyria stepped forward, Yara grabbed her arm. "Wait," she whispered, her voice tense. "Something's not right." The ground beneath their feet began to tremble, and from the shadows at the edges of the chamber, figures began to emerge. At first, they were nothing but dark shapes, but as they drew closer, Illyria could see their skeletal forms, ancient warriors, their bones clad in rusted armor and tattered robes. Their eyes glowed with a faint, malevolent light. "The guardians of the sword," Lyrael murmured, her voice filled with awe and fear. "They will not let us take it so easily." General Caden drew his sword ready for a fight, but Illyria held up a hand. "No," she said softly. "Violence will not win us the sword. The seer said only the purest of heart can wield it. If we fight, we'll fail." Yara stepped closer to Illyria. "What do we do then?" Illyria thought for a moment, her eyes fixed on the skeletal guardians. They stood motionless, watching her with hollow eyes, as if waiting for her next move. "Illyria," a voice echoed through the chamber. It was the same voice from her dream, the deep, ancient whisper that had warned her. "You seek the sword, but only one who understands sacrifice may claim it." Illyria swallowed hard, her heart pounding. She knew what she had to do. Slowly, she stepped toward the altar, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I don't seek the sword for power," she said, her voice steady. "I seek it to protect my people, to save Aurem from a darkness that threatens to consume us all." The skeletal guardians did not move, but the tremors in the ground began to subside. Illyria continued, "If you require a sacrifice, I offer myself, my life, my crown, whatever it takes to save my kingdom." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then one of the guardians stepped forward, its skeletal hand outstretched. Illyria held her breath as it approached. Would it strike her down? Was this the end? But instead, the guardian gently placed its bony hand on her shoulder. "You understand," it said, its voice like the wind through an ancient crypt. "The sword is yours." The other guardians bowed their heads, and the light around the altar grew brighter. Illyria stepped forward, her heart racing, and reached for the sword of light. As her fingers closed around the hilt, a surge of warmth and power rushed through her, filling her with strength she had never known. The sword pulsed with a bright, radiant energy, and for a brief moment Elira saw visions, images of Aurem, bathed in light, standing strong against the coming darkness. She saw her people, safe and free, and she saw herself, leading them into a new era of peace. But the vision was fleeting, and as it faded, the reality of the task ahead returned. The sword of light was hers, but the true battle had yet to begin. As Elira and her companions made their way out of the catacombs, the air above ground had grown thick with tension. Something was wrong. The once clear sky was now dark with swirling clouds, and a strange energy crackled in the air. "The Obsidian Order," General Caden muttered, his hand gripping his sword. "They've already begun." Elira's heart raced. "We have to get back to Aurem. The battle is upon us." But as they mounted their horses, a figure stepped out from the shadows. A man, draped in a long black cloak, his eyes glowing with the same dark energy that had haunted Elira's dreams. "I see you have found the sword, Queen Elira," the man said, his voice smooth but laced with malice. "But it will not save you." Elira tightened her grip on the sword of light. "Who are you?" The man smiled, his teeth glinting in the dark. "I am Malakar, High Priest of the Obsidian Order, and I have come to finish what Thorian started." Before Elira could react, the ground beneath them erupted with shadowy tendrils, wrapping around their legs and pulling them toward the earth. The horses whinnied in terror, and the group struggled to break free. "You cannot stop the darkness, Elira," Malakar hissed, his eyes fixed on the sword in her hand. "The ancient pact is sealed. The lost heir will fall, and Aurem will belong to the shadows." But Elira, her heart filled with the power of the sword of light, refused to be cowed. She raised the sword high, and with a flash of blinding light, the shadowy tendrils dissolved into nothingness. Malakar stepped back, momentarily stunned by the sword's power. "You may have the sword," he growled, "but the true battle has just begun. The heir will be ours." With a swirl of his cloak, Malakar vanished into the shadows, leaving Elira and her companions alone in the eerie silence. Elira sheathed the sword of light and turned to her friends. "We have to get back to Aurem," she said, her voice filled with urgency. "The Obsidian Order is already moving against us, and we must find the lost heir before they do." The race to save Aurem was far from over. With the sword of light now in her possession, Elira and her companions rode swiftly toward the capital of Aurem, their hearts filled with both hope and dread. The dark forces of the Obsidian Order were already on the move, and the skies above the kingdom were heavy with ominous clouds. Elira knew that the final confrontation was inevitable. Malakar had made it clear that the lost heir was their target, and the Order would stop at nothing to claim Aurem's soul. As they rode across the plains, the once green and flourishing fields had turned grey and lifeless. The closer they got to the capital, the more the air buzzed with a sinister energy. The shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, as if watching their every move. Elira's mind raced. How could she prepare her people for what was to come? And who was the lost heir that Malakar spoke of? She had grown up believing she was the rightful queen, but the revelation of another heir complicated everything. "We're getting close," General Caden said, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. "The city walls are just ahead." But as they crested a hill, the sight before them made Elira's heart drop. Aurem, once a vibrant and bustling capital, was now surrounded by a thick, black mist. From within the mist, strange figures moved, warriors clad in shadow, their glowing red eyes the only thing visible in the swirling darkness. The Obsidian Order had arrived. "They're already here," Yara gasped, her hand instinctively gripping the reins of her horse. "The battle has begun." Elira's grip tightened on the hilt of the Sword of Light. "We have to get inside the city," she said firmly. "The people need us." As they approached the city gates, the thick mist seemed to pulse with dark magic, and the shadow warriors turned their glowing eyes toward Elira's group. The Sword of Light hummed with power in her hand, reacting to the presence of such overwhelming darkness. "Form up!" General Caden shouted, drawing his sword. The warriors of Aurem that had traveled with them fanned out in a defensive formation, ready to protect their queen at all costs. The first wave of shadow warriors charged, their movements swift and unnatural. They moved like liquid darkness, weaving through the mist with terrifying speed. General Caden swung his sword with precision, cutting through the shadows, but each time one fell, another seemed to rise from the mist. Elira, knowing the Sword of Light was their only hope, raised the blade high. The moment the sword glowed brighter, the shadows recoiled, hissing and retreating from its radiant energy. "Stay behind me," Elira commanded as she slashed through the darkness, each stroke of the sword sending waves of light that scattered the shadow warriors. The mist parted where the light touched, creating a clear path toward the city gates. Yara and Lyriel stayed close, using their magic to support the troops, but even they knew the shadow warriors couldn't be defeated by ordinary means. Only the Sword of Light seemed to have the power to destroy them completely. As they fought their way to the city gates, Elira noticed that the gates were closed, barred from the inside. Panic surged through her. Were her own people so consumed by fear that they had shut themselves off from help? "Open the gates!" she shouted, her voice echoing over the battlefield. "It's Queen Elira. Let us in." For a moment there was no response, only the sound of battle and the hiss of the mist. But then a voice called from atop the city wall. "Open the gates!" It was the voice of Captain Ilian, the leader of Aurem's city guard. "The queen has returned." With a loud creak, the heavy gates slowly opened, allowing Elira and her companions to rush inside. As soon as they crossed the threshold, the gates slammed shut, sealing the city off from the advancing shadow army. Elira turned to Captain Ilian, whose face was lined with exhaustion but filled with relief at her return. "Thank the gods you're here, my queen," he said, bowing deeply. "The city is under siege, and we don't know how much longer we can hold them off." Elira sheathed the Sword of Light for the moment. "Gather all able-bodied soldiers. We must defend Aurem at all costs, and send word to the palace. Prepare for an all-out battle." Captain Ilian nodded. "I'll mobilize the troops immediately. But my queen, there's something you should know." "What is it?" Elira asked, sensing his unease. "The Obsidian Order didn't come just for the city," he said gravely. "They came for the palace. They've been searching for something, or someone." Elira's heart skipped a beat. The lost heir. Could the Order have already found them? As Elira made her way to the palace, the streets were filled with panic. Citizens huddled in their homes, and the once bustling market squares were eerily silent. The shadows outside the city walls pulsed and pressed against the barrier, growing more intense with each passing minute. When Elira arrived at the palace, she was met by a council of elders, their faces pale with fear. Elder Serin, the head of the council, approached her quickly. "My queen, the Obsidian Order has breached the palace," Serin said, his voice shaking. "They're searching for something in the royal crypts." Elira's blood ran cold. The royal crypts, the resting place of her ancestors, had always been considered sacred ground. If the Order had entered them, it meant they were close to finding the lost heir. Without a moment's hesitation, Elira led her companions to the crypts, descending the long stone staircase into the depths below the palace. The air grew colder as they went deeper, and the walls were lined with the statues of long-dead kings and queens, watching silently as they passed. As they neared the entrance to the crypts, they heard voices, low, chanting voices that echoed through the chamber. Illyra signaled for silence, and they crept forward until they could see the figures inside. There, in the center of the crypt, stood Malakar, the high priest of the Obsidian Order, surrounded by his followers. His hands were raised, and in front of him was an ancient stone tomb, its lid glowing with a faint pulsing light. The tomb of the lost heir. "You're too late, Queen Illyra," Malakar said without turning around. He could sense her presence. "The heir belongs to us now." Illyra drew the sword of light, the blade gleaming in the dim light of the crypt. "I won't let you desecrate my ancestors' tombs, Malakar. The sword of light will destroy you and your order." Malakar turned to face her, a cruel smile on his lips. "Ah, the sword of light, how quaint. But you forget, Queen Illyra, the heir's blood is tied to the shadows. You cannot win this battle." Before Illyra could respond, the tomb burst open with a violent surge of dark energy, and from within it rose a figure, cloaked in shadow but undeniably alive. The lost heir. Their face was obscured, but their presence filled the chamber with a chilling cold. Malakar's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Behold, the true ruler of Aurem, the one who was promised to the shadows." Illyra's heart raced. The lost heir, tied to both light and darkness, stood before her. She didn't know if they were friend or foe, but one thing was certain. If she didn't act, the Obsidian Order would claim them for the Shadow Realm. Summoning all her courage, Illyra stepped forward, raising the Sword of Light. "I don't care what ancient pact you made, Malakar. Aurem's future is its own. The heir belongs to this kingdom, not to your twisted darkness." Malakar laughed, his voice echoing through the crypt. "We shall see." With a wave of his hand, the shadow warriors swarmed the chamber, their red eyes gleaming in the darkness. Illyra swung the sword of light, cutting through the darkness with radiant energy, but the shadow warriors kept coming. It was then that the lost heir spoke, their voice soft but filled with power. "Enough." The shadows recoiled at the sound of the heir's voice, as if they were bound to obey. Malakar's smug grin faltered, his eyes narrowing. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "You are bound to us." But the lost heir stepped forward, their cloak of shadows dissipating to reveal a figure bathed in both light and darkness. "I am bound to no one," they said, their voice growing stronger. "Not to the shadows, and not to you." Illyra's heart soared with hope. The lost heir was resisting the Obsidian Order's influence. Malakar, furious, raised his hand to strike the air with dark magic, but Illyra moved faster. She lunged forward, the sword of light blazing as it cut through Malakar's magic and struck him down. The high priest fell to the ground, his form dissolving into shadow, and with his fall, the power of the Obsidian Order began to wane. The shadow warriors vanished, and the mist that had surrounded Aurem lifted. The battle was over, but the lost heir remained, standing before Illyra with a calm, unreadable expression. "You saved me," the heir said quietly. Illyra lowered the sword of light. "No," she replied. "You saved Aurem." Back in the throne room of the palace, the people of Aurem gathered to celebrate their victory. The shadow of the Obsidian Order had been lifted, but the kingdom still faced one final question: who would rule? The lost heir stood beside Illyra, their true identity revealed. They were Kaelin, the child of one of Illyra's ancestors, stolen away by the Order long ago and raised in the shadows. But now, free from their influence, Kaelin had a choice to make. "The throne is yours by birthright," Illyra said, offering them the crown. But Kaelin shook their head. "The throne belongs to the one who earned it," Elira was stunned. "You're refusing the crown?" Kaelin smiled softly. "You fought for Aurem. You led the people through the darkness. You are their queen, Elira, and always have been." With those words, Kaelin turned and walked into the night, leaving Aurem in the hands of its true queen. With the Obsidian Order defeated and the lost heir choosing a different path, Elira was crowned once more, this time with the full knowledge that she had truly earned her place as queen. The kingdom of Aurem entered a new era, one of peace and prosperity, guided by the light that Elira carried within her. And though the shadows would always linger on the edges of the world, she knew that with the sword of light and the strength of her people, they could face whatever challenges the future held. But somewhere, deep in the forgotten corners of the land, a new darkness stirred, watching and waiting for the next opportunity to strike. The story of Queen Elira, the lost heir, and the battle for Aurem was far from over. The kingdom of Aurem flourished under Queen Elira's reign. The shadow of the Obsidian Order had lifted, the skies were clear once more, and the people rejoiced in the peace and prosperity that had returned to their land. Elira ruled with wisdom, compassion, and the strength of one who had fought through darkness to protect her people. But as the years passed, Elira began to realize that true leadership was not just about winning battles or wielding power. It was about guiding her people through the challenges that followed in the wake of victory. And soon, a new challenge began to loom on the horizon, not one born of dark magic or ancient curses, but of greed, ambition, and the ambitions of men. One bright summer morning, Elira sat in council with her advisors. The royal chamber was filled with the sounds of lively discussion as the kingdom's nobles debated how best to expand Aurem's influence. Since the fall of the Obsidian Order, neighboring kingdoms had begun to take notice of Aurem's newfound strength. Some wanted alliances, while others viewed the kingdom's rise with suspicion. "I believe we should solidify our power by conquering the lands to the west," one noble said confidently. "Aurem's strength is unmatched now. It is time we claim what is rightfully ours." General Caden, still Elira's most trusted military advisor, frowned. Conquering the West would mean war. After all we've been through, do we really want to bring more conflict to Aurem? The room fell silent as the nobles turned to Queen Elira, awaiting her decision. Her heart was heavy as she listened to their arguments. Aurem was strong, yes, but strength alone could not secure a future of peace. Elira stood, her regal presence commanding attention. "We did not fight the Obsidian Order to become the very force of darkness we once defeated," she said firmly. "Aurem will not be a kingdom that conquers through violence. We will seek alliances, not war. Our strength lies in unity, not in the subjugation of others." The nobles exchanged uncertain glances, but none dared to argue with their queen. Elira had proven time and again that her wisdom was not to be questioned. "We will open our doors to trade and diplomacy," Elira continued. "Let the other kingdoms see that Aurem thrives not because of power, but because of its people, its values, and its heart." Her decision was final, and though some grumbled in private, they knew that Queen Elira's vision had always been true. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the skies of Aurem were painted with hues of orange and purple, a mysterious visitor arrived at the palace gates. The gods, cautious yet intrigued, brought the stranger before the queen. He was an old man, bent with age, his long robes tattered and worn. His eyes, however, were sharp and wise, glittering with the light of countless stories yet untold. "Who are you?" Elira asked, curious but wary. The old man bowed deeply. "I am Eric, a wandering sage. I have come from far lands, hearing tales of Queen Elira, the one who brought light to the shadows. Elira's eyes narrowed slightly. Why have you sought me out? I come not to bring danger, but to offer wisdom, Eric replied. For I have seen the rise and fall of many kingdoms, and I have learned that even the brightest light can cast long shadows. His words unsettled the court, but Elira's curiosity was piqued. Speak, then. What wisdom do you bring? Eric straightened, his voice low and steady. You have built a kingdom of peace, my queen, but peace is fragile. There will come a time when your people, drunk on prosperity, will forget the lessons of the past. They will hunger for more, for power, for wealth, for conquest. The room fell silent as Eric's words sank in. Elira knew that he spoke the truth. Already she had seen the seeds of ambition growing in the hearts of some of her nobles. But what could she do to prevent Aurem from falling into the same traps that had ensnared so many other kingdoms? The heart of a kingdom is its people, Eric continued, and if their hearts are not nourished with wisdom and compassion, they will turn to greed and violence. You must teach them, my queen, teach them to value what truly matters. Elira nodded slowly, understanding the weight of his message. The battles she had fought against darkness were nothing compared to the battle for the soul of her kingdom. She had to ensure that the people of Aurem did not forget the lessons of their past. In the weeks that followed, Elira called for the creation of a new tradition, the Festival of Remembrance. It would be a yearly celebration, not of Aurem's power or wealth, but of its resilience, its kindness, and the strength of its people. The festival would serve as a reminder of the darkness they had overcome and the light they had chosen to follow. During the first festival, Elira stood before the gathered crowd in the grand square of Aurem, the sword of light resting in her hands. Its gleaming blade caught the sunlight, casting bright reflections across the crowd. My people, Elira began, her voice carrying across the square. We stand here today not as conquerors, but as survivors. We have faced the darkness together and have emerged stronger for it, but let us not forget what that darkness taught us. She paused, looking out over the faces of her people, faces filled with hope and pride, but also with a hunger for more. Elira knew she had to temper that hunger with wisdom. We are not defined by our strength in battle, nor by the wealth we possess, she continued. We are defined by our hearts, by the kindness we show to one another, by the unity we build, and by the peace we choose to protect. The people listened intently, their eyes filled with admiration for their queen. Elira lifted the sword of light high. Let this sword be a symbol not of power, but of hope. Let it remind us that true strength comes not from domination, but from love, from compassion, and from the courage to stand for what is right. As the festival continued, Elira watched as her people celebrated not just their victory over the Obsidian Order, but their unity as a kingdom. For the first time, she felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that Aurem's future was in good hands. Years passed, and Queen Elira grew older, but the legacy she built continued to shape the kingdom of Aurem. The lessons she imparted, the importance of kindness, the strength of unity, and the value of peace, became the foundation upon which future generations built their lives. In the end, Elira's reign was remembered not for the battles she fought, but for the wisdom she shared. And as her people flourished, they carried forward the light she had brought to Aurem, ensuring that the darkness of the past would never return. Before her final days, Elira gathered her closest advisors and her people one last time. She stood in the same square where she had wielded the sword of light so many years before, her voice as strong and steady as ever. Remember this, my people, she said, her eyes filled with the wisdom of a lifetime. True leadership is not about power. It is about service. It is about lifting others up, protecting the weak, and standing together as one. With those final words, Queen Elira passed on the Sword of Light, not to a ruler seeking glory, but to her people, to all of Aurem, as a symbol of the light they would carry forward. Queen Elira's reign came to an end, but her legacy lived on. The kingdom of Aurem continued to thrive, guided by the principles she had instilled in its people. And though new challenges would arise, the light of Elira's wisdom and compassion would always shine as a beacon of hope for future generations. The story of Queen Elira teaches us that true strength lies in unity, not in conquest. A leader's greatest power is the love and respect of their people. Victory is not the end of the journey, it is the beginning of a greater responsibility to preserve peace. The heart of a kingdom or any community is its people. Their values and kindness will define its future, and as the people of Aurem carried these lessons forward, they ensured that the light of Queen Elira would never fade, even in the darkest of times. Thank you very much for watching. Like, subscribe, and comment for more captivating stories. Stay tuned for more.